the rebuilt, reloading, talent compiling Buckeyes. This is College Game Day podcast for Wednesday, January 24th. Rece and Pete Thamel. Ohio State has a boatload of high-profile portal additions, most notably Caleb Downs from Alabama, but also Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. They got really the five-star quarterback that was at Alabama, Julian Sayin. That was almost appeared to me to be calculated. I'm sure that Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb would have been happy to have Julian Sayin stay and compete. But this was one of those deals where I don't blame Sayin one bit, because they brought in Austin Mack through the portal, who is quarterback of the future at Washington. So then you get in a situation much like I see in baseball. Like when my son was being recruited, the one thing I said to him is like, nobody's going to give you anything, but you got to get a vibe from the coach, whether he believes in you or not. Because if he doesn't believe in you, and all that believe in you means is that they're going to give you an equal opportunity with the expectation that you're good enough to be the starter, right? If they are questioning you, or they have someone else that they believe in more, or someone in this case that they know better, like Austin Mack, well, then Julian Sayin's in a position where, okay, I can't just be a little better. I've probably got to be a lot better. And I probably also have to hope the other guy stinks it up. And that's not a good place to be. So I didn't blame him a bit. And I think this was almost like hedging your bet a little bit for the next few years, because now you have a quarterback coming in that knows the system, and he has a year in your system already, and now he's a viable contender to, at the very least, be the backup, if not, depending on how Jalen Milroe develops, see if he can hold on to the job in the new system. Ohio State, meanwhile, and I know they've got Aaron Nolan, but Sayin goes in more on an equal footing, it seems like, with Will Howard going there, who I left out with portal acquisition. Yeah. Will Howard there, and now Sayin can push, but he also can still develop in a very similar situation, surrounded by great talent as he would have been at Alabama, and maybe in a situation where he doesn't feel that he's behind anybody before he really gets started. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, it makes a lot of sense. And if there's one thing that it's almost like a compliment to Kalen DeBoer that he left, because if Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb want Austin Mack, they know exactly what they have in Austin Mack, right?
Yeah.
Those guys have a full year of seeing him every day, seeing him in scout team. Like, they have all the film. They have all the receipts. He's a physically gifted guy with good pedigree. So I don't think this was Julian Sayin, like, being afraid to compete. I just think it was Julian Sayin looking for an even playing field.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
no question. And that's not to say Kalen and Ryan Grubb are going to be unfair. It's just, look.
You're biased to what you know.
Yeah, everybody's trying to win,
you know?
And it's okay. And I think everybody made a decision that was in their own best interest, which is fine.
No,
perfectly fine.
Think about Sayin comes 3,000 miles away, starts class.
I felt basically for him. Yeah.
Yeah. And then basically the end of day first class, there's a 4:00 staff meeting, and the guy you came to play, and he was very open about that in his recruitment. I want to go play for Nick Saban. Mm-hmm. And look, like a lot of dudes did that. And so, but because you've gone to class, I believe he burns the one-time transfer. So you got to go to a place where it's proven at that point, right? Where you are going to develop, you need to be for a couple of years, at least till you graduate. And it'll be really interesting, right? We've seen some interesting quarterback competitions at Ohio State over the years, right? They almost have cornered the market on them. And this is the first time we've had a 5-man band with Will Howard, Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz, obviously, Aaron Noland, who's a fantastic prospect, by the way. Like, again, my knowledge of him as a player is limited to clips on the internet, but certainly he was the ESPN number 31 player, the number 2 drop back or pocket passer, and obviously Julian Sayin is number 3. So you have the rare 2 5-star caliber guys who are going to go at it. And yes, the parlor game of how many Ohio State quarterbacks will be on the roster when they open next year is certainly going to be an active one because it probably won't be 5 because those guys are all talented and have market value. And I know Devin Brown got hurt in that bowl game. I've seen enough of him that I think he's pretty talented, Rece.
Yes.
And he's been banged up and such. But it was a little bit like Alabama last year after spring. Remember they had the flirtation with Van Dyke from Miami. I think it will be starting to make the mental lists of like best available type guys after the spring. And I think Devin Brown's an NFL quarterback, in the long term. So it'll be interesting to see the market and what kind of market. There was not a very robust post-spring quarterback market last year. I feel like that's going to be drastically different this year.
And some will be taking flyers on guys who didn't win jobs, haven't played much. Devin Brown's an example. If he doesn't wind up as the number one guy at Ohio State, and maybe he wants to stay and continue to prove that he will be that eventually, because Howard, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Howard only has 1 year, right? I think he has 1 year at Ohio State.
Yes, Will Howard definitely has only 1 year left. I believe he's started 27 games, Rece.
Yeah, well, that's I ran into a friend of Will's dad who kind of set me up with a question on the plane. And I answered honestly. He said he didn't tell me who he was. And he said, what do you think of the Buckeyes getting Will Howard? I said, look, Will's a really good player. I said, he's played a lot. I said, I think he's a good guy. Will do a good job for them. And I should have stopped right there. But what I said was, I like Kyle McCord too. I said, I
went 11-1.
I know what I said. I don't know that I'm going to sit here and tell you, even though I'm a fan of Will Howard. I like him. I don't know that I'm going to sit here and tell you that I believe there's this drastic over the top upgrade, so we'll see. Maybe there is. I hope that there's a drastic upgrade for Will Howard, and I hope Kyle McCord goes and kills it at Syracuse. That'd be great.
Sure.
But we'll see anyway. That's the one thing. The philosophy on it, there are people close to the Ohio State program, and I'm not talking about who people are going to think I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Kirk. He didn't say this. People close to the Ohio State program who said in the offseason, well, Ohio State's not going to do NIL this way. They're going to do it where you just get a little bit of money and set you up with businesses in town. If you're successful, you're going to make a lot of money. No, that's not what they did. And maybe it was what they intended to do at one point, and it's not a criticism. It's within the rules, and they're going to compete. Godspeed. Good for you. But now all the chips are in the middle of the table. Now they've done this thing. I'm not one. I don't believe there is real heat, nor should there be, on Ryan Day. There are discontented factions of fans that every school in America has if you don't win every game and cover every spread and raise the national championship trophy. That said, there might be some real discontent if Ohio State, let's say, doesn't win the Big Ten, goes to the playoff and either loses a home game in the first round or loses in the quarterfinal, and you've spent whatever the total ends up being, and you don't get more out of it than you had. That might, I don't know if that would just cause a reevaluation from Ryan Day about how he would go about his business, if it would, cause such consternation among the Buckeye faithful that it then becomes uncomfortable. Maybe a lot of that would hinge on whether they win that game against Michigan, or at least one of the two games, if there are two games, against Michigan next year. But I do feel as if not that Ohio State isn't by definition always all in on winning. They are. But this feels like they've, as I continue the half-baked poker analogies, as if they've gone to a higher stakes table and said, hey, we found some more money, and here's some more we'd like to push into the middle to win it all right now.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really interesting, the Michigan response to this, because if there's one thing a championship does, and Michigan has a wealthy fan base, right? Like they have a vast, giant, wealthy fan base, is to see how they respond to this late spring. But wouldn't it be poetic justice, Rece, if in the first iteration of this playoff, Michigan and Ohio State end up playing each other again?
How good? Well, what if they play three times?
I mean that would be axis shifting. That'd be like the Carolina Duke K's last game in the Final Four. That would just be that would just be a completely different set of circumstances. But Ryan Day's won 87.5% of his games.
I know.
I don't know if that's the highest percentage of an active coach, but if it's not, it's definitely in the top 3, right?
Yeah.
Like with Nick gone, I don't think Nick was there. So I think any talk about his job is a little bit, and again, I'm not saying you said that, but
I'm not talking about him getting fired.
Yes.
I'm just talking about like real discontent.
Yeah.
The only people discontented with what Ryan Day's done right now are people who don't understand that real rivalries mean both teams are good and sometimes you don't win. I mean, sometimes you don't win, against another good team. And that's, that's all that's happened. I just wonder if it shifts a little bit, not toward losing his job. What I mean is just like I think the vast majority of reasonable Ohio State fans feel the way you and I do. He's a great coach. He's doing a fantastic job, has come very close to even more than he's accomplished, whether it's that the playoff game a few years ago against Clemson, certainly the playoff game against Georgia, the last drive this year against Michigan. Who knows what happens if they end up winning that game. So he's been close to a whole lot more and just off the charts excellent overall. So, I think he is a tremendous coach and leader. But if you shift, I don't know if shifting the paradigm is the right word for it, but if you up the ante, go to the higher stakes table, say, okay, you know what? We're going to do what Texas is doing and what Alabama's doing, what Georgia's doing. We're doing all this. Let's go. We're going to be the hybrid of Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss. We're going to be the hybrid here, and we're going to build it like Georgia and Alabama have, but we're going to supplement it with the vigor in the portal of Lane Kiffin. And so now that takes you to a different table and maybe changes the perception of what you should accomplish and what will be viewed as a success and worthy of the investment.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable off-the-field shift. If we had a podcast a year ago and you had said, what is Ohio State's NIL? I would just said they're upper middle class. They haven't been overly aggressive. It wasn't non-existent, but it wasn't Texas A&M, Ole Miss, one of these real push-forward operations. It was just kind of as much they did what they had to do. It was almost felt a little reluctant, quite frankly. And Gene Smith, the departing athletic director, is a wonderful AD. I don't think he was out beating the bushes for NIL. I think he was letting those things take care of themselves and worrying about 36 sports. And I do think that the hiring of Ross Bjork as the athletic director was like a pure capitalism play, right? Like for all of the things that have gone wrong at A&M and Ole Miss under Bjork, the one thing that went right was he raised money and there was energy pushed to NIL in an aggressive early way. And so that was a little bit of a hand tip administratively before the flurry. It might have been amid the flurry, depending on what day he was hired and announced and everything like that. But it's been a fascinating shift because as much attention as Downs got and Judkins got and Sayin got, I think it's more important, Rece, that they kept Travion Henderson, Emeka Egbuka, Donovan Jackson, the guard, who's like a second-round pick type talent. And quite frankly, if there's a on-field concern for Ohio State next season that's not addressed, it's their offensive line. Their offensive line was abysmal against Missouri, and it got overwhelmed at times against Michigan, and that has been an area of weakness in the program in recent seasons. So, some people snickered at Seth McLaughlin going from Bama to there because he had all those snap issues in the Rose Bowl, but they need upgrades there in that spot. And then on defense, obviously Denzel Burke, Tyleek Williams, and then the two ends. Tui Molowau, how'd I do?
Yep, very good. Tui Molowau.
Okay, JTT, Tui Molowau. And then Jack Sawyer, a little easier to roll off the tongue. So there's a nucleus of guys that when I did the breakdown of Ohio State, Michigan and talked to scouts in November, they thought Burke was going pro. Henderson was going pro. Jackson was a viable guy. He didn't have a great year last year, especially early, but he's a guy who could have been picked in the top 100. Igbuka was expected to go pro. JTT was like foregone conclusion that it was going pro. So the ability to retain has been as important for Ohio State in this offseason as the ability to attract, some of the glistening portal gems.
Let's hit a couple of things quickly and bounce.
This feels like a late November podcast. Which yeah, it does. Pretty much Ohio State, Michigan.
I know exactly. It's been fun. I want to hit on one thing though, as it pertains to Ohio State. Maybe there's another. Maybe Texas is an option too. Preseason number 1 next year. You going Ohio State with all the new additions, or Georgia?
I would say Georgia for now.
Me too.
I'm going to give Georgia the edge for now.
Yeah, me too.
A lot of roster movement left here, but I would say Bulldogs. Then, and I haven't looked at it super holistically, but Bulldogs Buckeyes feels
Texas?
right. Is there
too many losses on the defensive front for it to give Texas that to start? They might prove worthy, as the season goes along.
Yeah, no, I do think there's some concern there at tackle. I think they added a tackle from Houston in the portal, but they don't have 2 first-round picks there in Sweat and Murphy. So, but I do think Sark has earned some benefit of the doubt with development and such too now, too. And they've had some great portal ads as well. So, I think that they're certainly in that conversation. Who is the next SEC team, Rece?
I think probably because of the change, I would probably lean Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Probably Ole Miss, Missouri is going to be good, and
yes,
I do think that reports of Alabama's impending demise are greatly exaggerated. But it's, there are going to be bumps there, and even if they had retained everybody, there were going to be bumps. I think Kalen DeBoer is a terrific coach, and I'm not even talking about fit now. I'm talking about a language that has been handed down for 17 years. Like Greg McElroy talked about how the reason the new coordinators had to come in and adapt to the terminology and nomenclature that Nick Saban preferred was because he wanted to know what was going on. He also believed in it. Tommy Rece even mentioned that if you wanted to change anything about a play call, that unlike anywhere he had ever been before, that you had to go explain it to the boss, and tell him why you were doing that. Now, he said, Tommy pointed out, he'll let you do it. You just need to go in and have a good reason for it. So there's a fundamental language that, while I know the players turn over, it's been handed down for years and years, and now all of that changes. All of that's changing. And while the coaches may be able to talk to each other, for the most part, the Washington guys, especially coming in, meaning DeBoer, Grubb, and then on the defensive side, Womack has people that he knows on the defensive side. You got to get it to the players. And that will probably mean that there are going to be some unexpected bumps. That said, they're still going to be good. They're still going to be really good. And they'll probably be way better in November than they are in September. So, I don't think they're so ravaged by the portal defections. Now, look, is it good to lose Caleb Downs? No. Is it good to lose Isaiah Bond? No, it is not good. But they have a lot of talented people. They've recruited well for years and years, and there are guys who might have been lost in the shuffle a little bit, who are talented enough now to get a fresh set of downs. And maybe, no pun intended, with Caleb going to Ohio State, but to get a fresh set of downs and perhaps shine. And I think there will be enough of that for them to still be good, but probably not enough for them to be, in my judgment anyway, preseason ranked ahead of, I guess the second SEC team probably, or the next SEC team after Georgia and Texas, probably Ole Miss, and then maybe Alabama, Missouri, somebody.
Yeah, let me be undisciplined here, as we are wont to be, and try to tie this top 5 conversation we're having to our earlier conversation. How much do you think the playoff, Rece, changes the prism of how we judge coaches? Because James Franklin, for example, has finished in the top 12 a lot at Penn State. and he has not reached the 4-team CFP. He did win one Big Ten, I think, in 16.
16, right.
But just like, I just feel like if James Franklin is a consistent playoff coach, we think of him a lot different than James Franklin coming up just short a lot. Do you feel like becomes a paradigm shift in how coaches are judged because they are going to make it to the playoff?
It's going to depend on where you are. And it's still going for James Franklin, if he makes the playoff year after year as the 10 seed, but they can't win the road game, they can't beat Ohio State, Michigan, maybe Oregon, SC. If they can't win those types of games more consistently than they have, then I think it will perhaps add to the frustration. If Steve Sarkisian doesn't win a national championship at some point, if Kalen DeBoer doesn't, win the SEC and get a bye and ultimately, win a championship, there will be dissatisfaction there for them. And I think for Franklin, not much changes. Now take a guy like, let's say Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. Mm-hmm. If they consistently are in the mix to make the playoff, then I think that dissatisfaction of, that might come now of like, oh, we're always in the, the second tier Florida bowls or something like that makes coaches get fired ultimately or leave at a lot of places historically. Now, if you're in the mix and you make the playoff from time to time from Missouri, then that's going to give you a lot of long-term stability. So
they put those a statue on those big bifocals.
Yeah, they might. Yeah. So I think it's still, maybe it changes over the course of time, but I still think it depends on your blue blood program. Your program expectations are not going to change that much. And I think Penn State is probably a high enough level program where they are still going to feel as if they should win some of those games from time to time and probably win more than they have up to this point.
How about like a Friday night Penn State playoff game?
In Happy Valley?
Happy Valley, hosting, Texas.
I don't even care. But that would be super good. Hosting Texas,
fill in the brand name.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, doesn't even
just
matter.
The whiteout and some snow. Like, that is an experience. That is a bucket list. That is man. It'd take you 3 days to get home from that one.
A friend pointed out to me as I was sitting in Louisville Monday night, preparing to call the Louisville Duke basketball game, which I did last night. He said, a year from now, basically same Monday, is the national championship game in college football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
I haven't told Kate Thamel that yet.
You haven't broken down the expanded playoff calendar for Kate yet.
We're gonna let that roll.
Come on! You just went on vacation to an exotic beach locale. You mean to tell me you were sitting there with an umbrella in your drink and admiring all of the good Lord's beauty, that you didn't say, "Hey, by the way, Kate, December is shot with the home playoff games, and then we're going to stretch this thing all the way to the end of January, pretty much at least the third week." That wasn't the beach conversation?
I was worried about the San Jose State job and the Buffalo job. So, those were getting me in enough trouble. I didn't need a game 368 days away getting me in more trouble.
Well, those types of things will happen. So we'll continue on with the College Game Day podcast throughout the offseason once a week. We've had a good suggestion that we'll do the news at the top and try to take on topics in the latter half, which is sort of what we did today. Basically, you and I haven't talked in a few days, so we talked.
Yeah,
that was kind of what we do. Hopefully, that's why you like this podcast. We hope you do. We enjoy doing it. You can download it wherever you prefer to get your podcast or subscribe so you never miss an episode.